Today, number 11. The question is, how can we believe that the Pali Tripitaka is the original teachings of the Buddha? This subject is very important because this is not theoretical or imaginary or to accept through our devotion, but according to historical facts. And some people do not know what the meaning of this word, Pali Tripitaka. So I had to explain these two words before I give evidence. Pali is the language spoken in northern India during the Buddha's time. At that time, this language was not known as Pali. That is why some writers or some scholars try to tell us that the Buddha did not speak the Pali language. They create confusion, not knowing the real meaning. At that time, this language was known as Magadhi. Magadha is the name of that particular area. So the language spoken by the people was known as Magadhi. So the Buddha also used the same language. And there were 6 well-known languages at that time: Pali, Sanskrit, Ardha Magadhi, Paisachi, Surasena, Apabhransa. Well, these languages are no more there, but still they use Sanskrit, but not a spoken language. Pali language was developed and reorganized later. And the name, the Pali, was given at that time for that language spoken by the Buddha, which was known as Magadhi. That is why some people say the Buddha did not speak or used the Pali language. But no difference. But the difference is this: after collecting 45 years teaching, they have rearranged according to the subject matters 84,000 items explained by the Buddha. Again, they have divided the discourses or the sutras according to the length: short one, long one, categorized. Then divided into 3 sections. So these 3 sections are known as Sutra, Vinaya and Abhidhamma. 3 Pitaka means 3 sections, 3 baskets, 3 sections of the teachings of the Buddha. Then, the meaning of these three sections, Sutra, Vinaya, Abhidhamma. All the simple teachings, morals, ethics, advices given by the Buddha for us to cultivate our way of life and to be noble, to lead a peaceful, contented life. Another meaning is conventional teaching. Conventional means the words and the terms used by the public. But when we analyze the deeper aspect of these words and terms used by the Buddha, we cannot accept them as a real truth. In reality, we cannot find the meaning. Take a few examples, then you can understand. When we talk about sicknesses and medicines, we have our layman's language. But those who have studied medical science, they have different names for certain sicknesses and medicines. But we cannot understand those words unless we study the medicine. Again, when we come to science, we also talk about science. But scientists have their own words and terminologies, but we do not know them. But we use our layman's language, which we can understand. In the same manner, the Buddha also used the language spoken by the people to explain things according to their understanding capacity. That section is called Sutra. But remember, all those sutras that exist today were not uttered or taught by the Buddha. Because whenever you see the word sutra, you say this is the teachings of the Buddha. Not exactly. There were many sutras composed by the disciples from time to time. So we do not accommodate them as the Buddha word, the words uttered by the Buddha. But you can find the Buddha's teachings there. Again, in Sutra Pitaka, you can see Buddha Bhasita, Deva Bhasita, Savaka Bhasita, Isi Bhasita. Certain teachings given by the Buddha, certain teachings given by his disciples. Example, Sariputta, Ananda, Kasyapa, or well-known disciples have given many discourses. Later, they come and report to the Buddha. Today, we gave this sermon because a group of people or so and so approached and asked this. So we explain in this way. After listening to them, The Buddha said, yes, you are right. Later, their sermons also accommodated as the Buddha Dhamma, because confirmed by the Buddha. Another section called Deva Bhasita, presented by certain Devas. When you read one particular sutra, section which is called Samyutta Nikaya, one chapter is called Devata Samyutta, dialogue, discussion between Devas and Buddha. When Devas come and revealed something or expressed their views, certain things were confirmed by the Buddha and certain things were rejected by the Buddha. Very interesting dialogue. And this section also included into Tripitaka. Then Isi Bhasita. Isi means sages, very highly intellectual, philosophically, doctrinally, psychologically, spiritually. When they had some dialogue with the Buddha, he acknowledged, appreciated and accepted many of them. Truth is truth. This section also included into the Buddha's teaching in the Tripitaka, confirmed by the Buddha. Then another section, Vinaya Pitaka. Vinaya means discipline or self-training. Here in this particular section, all the necessary rules, advices or disciplinary codes for monks and nuns to lead a monastic life or pure religious life. This particular section is called Vinaya Pitaka. Then for the layman, in the same Sutra Pitaka, the Buddha has given certain advices. Such advices you can find in Mangala Sutta, Parabhava Sutta, Vasala Sutta, Sigalovada Sutta and Vyaggapadya Sutra, because he did not want to introduce so many religious rules for the lay people, because they have to lead a worldly life and they want to experience worldly pleasures. They have not renounced the worldly life. Therefore, they must have certain freedom to enjoy, to experience worldly life without violating peace and happiness of others and without violating morals and ethics. Such advices you can find in Sutra Pitaka. This is Vinaya for lay people. And the other section is called Abhidhamma. Abhidhamma means highest Dhamma. Here you can see the difference between the Dhamma in Sutra Pitaka and the Dhamma in Abhidhamma Pitaka. In Abhidhamma, the words and the terms or terminologies he used in absolute sense. That means ultimate, not conventional, not simply by using the word used by the ordinary people. That is why it is called Abhidhamma, the highest Dhamma. In simple language, we can summarize Abhidhamma in this way. Analytical interpretation of the mind and the matter or the element. If not, summarized into 4 groups. Chitta, Cetasika, Rupa, Nibbana. Analysis of these 4 things is called Abhidhamma. These interpretations or analytical interpretations you cannot find in any other religions. And what is the first item? Chitta, the nature of the mind, human mind. And how many mental faculties are there? And what are the duties of different mental faculties? And how do they function? And how these mental faculties create good karma and bad karma and neutral karmas. This is one aspect. Second item is Cetasika. Cetasika means thought. Mind is one thing, thought is another thing. Mind is pure mental energy. Thought means the ideas created by that mind. So after creating ideas and thoughts, we develop them. Certain thoughts we develop in our mind by polluting the purity of the mind, such as our jealousy, anger, greed, selfishness, and all the evil thoughts that we generate from the mind pollutes the purity of the mind. Then, on the other hand, by creating good thoughts, we cultivate and purify the mind by eradicating evil forces from that mind, such as our honesty, kindness, compassion, sincerity, all the good qualities. The more we develop these good qualities, the more we purify the mind. Chitta, Cetasika, 2 items. Third one is Rupa. Rupa means form. Visible or invisible form. That means the formations of some object by the combinations of elements and energies. We take this as body. This physical body is Rupa. That means visible object. Formation has taken place due to the combinations of elements and energies. Then explain what those energies are and what those elements are and how the formation takes place. This is the third item. Last one is Nibbana. Nibbana is free from these mental faculties and elements. That is why it is called unconditioned. All the other existing things in this universe are conditioned. Condition means come into existence due to the influence of something else. Now this body, this life, never appear in this way if there are no some other forces, factors, energies energies, element to depend. To condition this, there are so many other things. And this is condition. But Nibbana is free from this. That is why we introduce this as everlasting or unchangeable. Because there is nothing to create, nothing to destroy, nothing to appear, nothing to disappear, nothing to decay. That's why it is called unconditioned. So we regard this as the ultimate aim. To understand this, we had to reduce so many mental impurities from our mind. Otherwise we cannot understand, we cannot appreciate. Because we measure everything in worldly sense. In worldly sense, we cannot appreciate Nibbana. We have to develop our mind. This is called Abhidhamma. Now the trouble with you here in this country, you never had the chance to study Buddhism in any schools. And you had no chance to study Buddhism in any particular Buddhist institute as a subject. The knowledge that you have accumulated is very shallow. That means after listening and after reading certain books written by various people, you have gathered some sort of knowledge. But the knowledge that you have gathered is a concoction of so many things. Therefore, still you do not know actually what Buddhism is. That is the problem. But in many other countries, Buddhist countries, they have their one method, one system. Take Thailand. They have their culture, their way of life, and one system for them to practice Buddhism. So it is not a mixture of so many concepts and beliefs. Go to Sri Lanka and Burma, same system, because from their childhood they study. From their parents they study many things. In the schools they study Buddhism. After that they develop further in various other Buddhist institutes. But in this country there are no such facilities for you to study Buddhism systematically. That is why you maintain all sort of belief, and it is very difficult for you to get rid of certain belief. Again, after reading various books written by different writers who belong to different schools of Buddhism, because they try to justify the accuracy or the purity of one particular school by ridiculing other existing schools. So when you read this book, you may lose confidence or create more confusion. So you cannot understand what Buddhism is. So my advice is this. You should not try to monopolize or to tell others that you are belong to this particular group or sect or schools of Buddhism. Not necessary for you to say that you are belong to Theravada school or Mahayana school or Vajrayana schools or any other school. Forget about all these schools. Because when Buddhism was originated, none of those schools were there. Remember this. This is the historical fact. So if you can get rid of all these rubbish ideas, then you can understand what Buddhism is. After that, you never discriminate and you never try to glorify or justify that your school, your sect is more accurate than others. This is my advice. Now let us come to our subject. The question is, how can we believe that the Pali Tripitaka is the original teaching of the Buddha? That is the question. To understand this, you have to study Buddhist history or the development of Buddhism. This is more than 2,500 years old. Let us start from the beginning. All of you know, the Buddha has spent exactly 45 years and completely devoted, dedicated, sacrificed his life to enlighten others, to teach them how to lead a pure religious life. That was his mission. After his passing away, all the disciples, most of them were arahantas, not ordinary monks. They have decided to assemble and discuss what to do now. Because the Buddha has given all these discourses in various places where many of those disciples were not present. And the Buddha was alone in certain places. And the disciples do not know what he preached. To settle this problem, there is a guideline. When Venerable Ananda came and promised to look after, to attend to the Buddha, he made certain conditions. He said, under these conditions, I am going to serve you. So one of those conditions is, so whenever you give a sermon in my absence, you have to tell me what you preached. He had a wonderful memory. But many other disciples had no such opportunity to listen what the Buddha has taught in various other places. But on many other occasions, disciples also followed wherever he goes. That is why they have decided to meet and discuss. Supported by King Ajatasattu, the ruler in that particular kingdom, in a cave, Sattapanni caves. And they have decided to invite only Arahantas to attend this meeting. Ordinary monks were not entitled. But at that time, Venerable Ananda has not attained Arahanta. Now the problem is, without him, all the other monks could not hold this meeting. So when they were discussing this, what to do now? Ananda has developed up to Sotapanna, Sakadagami, Anagami, and only one more stage. And he developed that last stage also, attained Arahanta. The reason was given why Ananda could not attain Arahanta is very emotional. He had emotional attachment towards the Buddha. Remember this. The Buddha has given this warning on many occasions, not to develop our emotional attachment toward the Buddha. Because emotional attachment is one of the mental hindrances for our spiritual development. So after the passing away of the Buddha, and that emotional attachment is no more. That is why he could attain Arahanta. So then Ananda also attained. So they have discussed, confirmed by the majority. So that is why in many of those sutras you can see how they started, the historical background of the discourse. Evaṁ me sutaṁ ekaṁ samayaṁ bhagavā sāvatthiyaṁ viharati jetavane anātha pindikassa ārāme atako anyatara devata abhikkantaya rattiya abhikkantavanna. This is the historical background of this particular discourse. When the Buddha was dwelling in Jetavana monastery and such time, and so approached him, and the Buddha delivered this particular sermon. Then many other disciples also confirmed, yes, it is true. We also heard this. And so they went on discussing all the 45 years, the teaching or the discourses delivered by the Buddha. Then there was a big problem. This is also a very interesting one. Before his passing away, at the last moment, the Buddha has given this advice to the monks. He said, I have given you so many rules, disciplinary codes for you to follow. But I can understand in time to come, there will be some problems and difficulties for you to follow exactly the same rules in the same manner. Therefore, you are at liberty to amend or to change or to withdraw certain minor rules, Vinaya rules. He has given this freedom. Because many of those Vinaya rules are based on traditions, customs, manners. In India, at that time, that means 2,500 years ago. And Buddhism was confined only to that particular area during the Buddha's time, not even the whole country. When Buddhism started to develop, spread all over the country, the other part of the country, their way of life, their languages, their manners, their traditions are entirely different. Therefore, they have to change. And today, when we are going to work as missionaries in the West, in America and Europe, you can see the vast difference. Their culture and our culture, their way of life and our way of life, their manners and etiquettes and traditions and customs. So can we follow the same tradition, Thai tradition, Sri Lankan tradition, Burmese tradition, Indian tradition in those countries? Impossible, not practical. That is why the Buddha has given this freedom. But the trouble is, they could not decide what those minor rules were. They could not come to any conclusion. Then finally, they have decided to uphold everything without changing any rules. The decision made by these disciples, because they were very honest, very sincere, very devout and holy people. Later, 100 years after his passing away, they experience so many problems, changes in the society, way of life, economy, social conditions, politics. Then the trouble started from there. However, they could manage to maintain for 100 years without changing any minor rules. Then 100 years after, during King Kala-Asoka, another Asoka, not Emperor Asoka, a group of young monks started little bit a revolution. They wanted to revolutionize certain Vinaya rules, change. But elderly monks could not agree with them. Then they decided to hold another second council. This is 100 years after the Buddha. First one, 3 months after his passing away. Now the second council, 100 years after, to discuss about Tripitaka. Then during this council, again they have decided not to change any rules, uphold within their level best. But many of those young monks could not agree with them. And at that time, the formations of different schools of Buddhism was germinated, started, but not established. Slowly going on developing. Even then, they could manage to maintain. Then, 200 years after the Buddha's passing away, during Emperor Asoka's time, the monks and Emperor Asoka also noticed many changes have taken place, and the disciples are trying to change the basic teachings of the Buddha and to add something else and to give new interpretation. And who are those disciples? When Buddhism has become very popular religion at that time, many of those Brahmins also came and joined. After becoming or after entering into the holy order, they did not sacrifice or give up their former traditions and belief, and they tried to imbue and introduce many of those Brahmins' traditions into Buddhism. Because the Buddha did not acknowledge or accommodate many of those existing Indian Brahminic traditions into Buddhism, but he accepted the truth, because in Indian religion, Indian philosophy, in Hinduism also there are so many truths and facts and reality. He accommodated all of them, but many things he had rejected completely. But these disciples again tried to introduce them. Then they have decided to hold the third Buddhist council 200 years after the Buddha, supported by Emperor Asoka, presided by Venerable Moggali Puttathissa, and they discussed. And they had to compose one particular book during this council to reject all those new ideas, new practices that they tried to introduce into Buddhism. Then the word Theravada was never appear in Buddhism up to this date. So 200 years after that, during that council, they have confirmed the original teaching and introduced this as Theravada. What is the meaning of this word? Thera means elders. Vada means ideas. Ideas accepted by the elders. That means the teachings of the Buddha accepted by the elderly monks. That is called Theravada. Before that there was no Theravada. So it does not mean that they have formed another schools of Buddhism without accommodating or incorporating those new concepts and practices into Buddhism. The basic teaching that they have accepted was introduced as Theravada. Now this is the history. Then Emperor Asoka's time, he used his full efforts to establish a religious way of life in the whole country. But there were many other religions. As a ruler, as an emperor, he did not discriminate in Asoka pillars. Even today, if you visit Sarnath, Benares, you can see the advice that he has given to the missionaries, Buddhist missionaries, what he says. Still exists. 2,300 years ago, the Buddhist attitude, he said. So when you go out to introduce Buddha's message, remember, not to ridicule, not to accuse, not to condemn other existing religion. You can reveal the truth taught by the Buddha. If you condemn the other existing religion, remember, you create damages to your own religion. This is the Buddhist attitude. So Buddhism was well established in the whole country. You know the nature of human mentality. In anything, whether politics or prosperity or religion or education, when the development takes place, and this development is followed by problems and troubles and difficulties, then more and more jealousy, selfishness, greed also develop together with development. Because many of those followers were not arahantas, were not real holy followers. They have their own human mind. Then slowly, the whole Buddhist community, mostly among the Sangha, not ordinary laymen, they are not belong to any school, only the monks, were divided into 18 schools after a few hundred years. Today, we are talking about 3 schools. Theravada, Mahayana, Vajrayana, only three. But few hundred years after the Buddha, the whole Sangha community divided into 18 schools. Then they had their own interpretation about karma and nirvana and rebirth and so many things after our life, different opinions. Later, many of those schools again absorbed into the major schools. Then, in the end, remained only three. All the others slowly absorbed into the others. Theravada, Mahayana and Vajrayana. Three schools. So I told you the word Theravada they used 200 years after the Buddha. So at that time there was no Mahayana or any other yanas. 700 years after the Buddha, there were many brilliant Buddhist scholars in India. Very highly intellectuals. Nagarjuna, Vasubandhu, Dipankara Sri Jnana, there was another emperor in Kashmir at that time. And he has given his full support to hold another Buddhist council. Now this was the fourth Buddhist council. But during this council, they did not follow this Tripitaka. In the first council, second council, third council, they followed Pali Tripitaka. But in the fourth council, they did not use even Pali language. Because many of those scholars were Brahmins. They were well versed in Sanskrit. So they have chosen Sanskrit language to hold that council. After that council, a school or the name of Mahayana come into existence, 700 years after the Buddha. That is why we cannot find in Tripitaka, the whole Tripitaka, the word Mahayana, because they have recorded Pali Tripitaka earlier. At that time there was no Mahayana. But when Mahayana started to write Tripitaka, they used Hinayana, used the word Hinayana for Theravada. These are historical facts. They have composed all the sutras in Sanskrit. So many. But they have introduced many new concepts, new beliefs, which we cannot find in Theravada or Pali Tripitaka. What are those things? They wanted to introduce the Buddha as some sort of God. The Buddha has rejected in his teaching on many occasions that he is not a God, but they try to introduce the Buddha as a God, divinity, divine power. Again, the life of the Buddha they have narrated in such a way, very beautiful, fantastic, lot of decoration, exaggerations. Those who read the life of the Buddha, you can see a lot of divine power, everywhere, miracles throughout his life. So they have very well decorated life of the Buddha and his teaching. Then, when Buddhism was introduced to other countries after the formations of this Mahayana, in those countries they have added some more salt and spices to become more tasty, especially in China. Remember, if they have not done this, Buddhism never become a world religion, because they have introduced life of the Buddha, stories and ghosts and so many other spirits, the Dhamma, Nirvana and heaven and paradise in such a way for ordinary people to understand very easily, without scratching their head, or they can understand all these things. But in Theravada, you had to read and read commentaries, interpretation, discuss so many things to understand. By knowing this problem, this Mahayana school, they have narrated all these things in such a way for ordinary people to appreciate, to understand, to cultivate mostly their devotional aspect. So that is how they develop more devotion, worshipping, offering, chanting, praying, and colorful ceremonies. Later, Theravada schools also learn from them. Originally, Theravada school did not concentrate in only morals and ethics and philosophy and meditation. But all the beautiful, colorful things that we perform today, we have learned from Mahayana school. And again, distributions of these small Buddha images, talismans and tantras and mantras, all these things, Mahayana, especially in Thailand, very famous in Thailand. They have learned all these things from Mahayana. Originally, they never had this method in Theravada Buddhism. So, we should not condemn them. We should not accuse them. I told you, if they have not done this, Buddhism never become a world religion. And in China, they have developed further and further. So Chinese tradition, Chinese culture, Chinese way of life is very strong. So Chinese did not surrender their traditions and culture because of Buddhism. So what they did, they enriched Buddhism by incorporating all their Chinese traditions and customs. That is why today we introduce one Buddhism as Chinese Buddhism. Otherwise, where is Chinese Buddhism, Ceylon Buddhism, Thai Buddhism? Buddhism is Buddhism. But when we develop Buddhism according to our own culture, our own tradition, our own way of life, we introduce this as Chinese Buddhism, Thai Buddhism, Japanese Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism. Then further development. Also, everything originated in India. Vajrayana school, today popular in Tibet, Nepal, Siberia, Mongolia, and that part of the world. And this is the latest development in India. And they have concentrated more on chanting and distributing all sorts of talismans and so many ceremonies. And they also developed. So they have developed Buddhism in Tibet and Nepal and Assam and Bhutan and Siberia because of these practices, because those people were interested in these practices. You can see how they have developed the teachings of the Buddha by concentrating on various aspects. But all have contributed something to maintain Buddhism, to introduce Buddhism, to propagate Buddhism. Now what is happening today? Since we have developed our own way of Buddhist way of life, by neglecting the basic teaching of the Buddha, we have forgotten what the Buddha taught. And we discuss, we concentrate, we practice something else. We develop further. Now more and more new schools will come, will appear in time to come. You cannot stop this. They can become more powerful. Depend on our way of thinking. When we become more worldly minded people, then we need so many things for our protection, precaution, worldly development, for our business, for our prosperity, for our pleasure, to avoid this and this. We concentrate only this much as religion. But we neglect moral development, spiritual development, mental training and discipline, slowly fading away. Concentrate more on various aspects which we think that contribute towards our worldly life. So the main purpose of religion is to find out some sort of solution to overcome our human problems. It is impossible for us to get rid of our human problems by developing worldly life. This advice was given by the Buddha. When you read Dhammapada, you can see his sayings. Anya hi labhupanisa, anya nibbanagamini. He says there are two ways in our life. Anya hi labhupanisa. There is one method for us to gain more worldly pleasures, worldly material things as worldly progress. There is one method. Anya nibbanagamini. There is another method for your spiritual development, mental training purity to reach final goal, Nibbana. And these two lines you cannot join together. Impossible. And what we are trying to do today, we join these two together. We want to gain more worldly, material things, worldly pleasures by using the name of religion. He has given more than enough advice. How to enjoy your worldly life under certain conditions. You are not at liberty to do anything to gain whatever you like. Then you violate all your religious principles. Again, by neglecting your duties as worldly people, if you have not renounced your worldly life, if you try to adapt, shape up your life by concentrating more on spiritual development, again you get into trouble. Because your way of life becomes nuisance to others, to your family members, because you have gone extremes because of your religion. If you want to follow that method, you have to renounce. Then there won't be any problem. Without that renunciation, if you want to go to extreme, you get into trouble, and your way of life also becomes nuisance to others. On the other hand, by neglecting your mental development, disciplines and morals and precepts, if you concentrate only on the worldly pleasures, you never gain satisfaction in your life. You invite more and more headaches and more responsibilities and worries. In the end, frustration. And you never satisfy simply by treading through this path in worldly life to find out the aim of your life or the purpose of your life. You will never find. Always complain, accuse, grumble, cry and fight and quarrel while enjoying. If you take this path, you cut down and reduce and minimize your worldly way of life, then you experience more peace in your mind, some sort of satisfaction in your life. And you won't experience so much disappointments and unsatisfactoriness in your life. And there is nothing for you to grumble and accuse and criticize. There is nothing for you to develop in your mind as jealousy. You can go on reducing all those things. In the end, you never create frustration or disappointment in your life. The more you develop, the more you feel happiness. But this way, the more you develop, the more you experience fear, insecurity, unsatisfactoriness, frustration. You can see the difference now. So, now the subject. How can we prove the Pali Tripitaka, the original teachings of the Buddha? There is no controversy whatsoever. Historians, archaeologists, philosophers, great thinkers, everybody accept. If not exactly the same words uttered by the Buddha. Pali Tipitaka is the nearest doctrine of the Buddha, but not others. Nearest, if not exactly the same word. Then how are we going to regard others, other schools? Can we say they are wrong? No, we cannot say. We cannot say they are wrong. Basic teachings you can find in Mahayana as well as Theravada. Let us take Four Noble Truths. No difference in Theravada and Mahayana. Eight Noble Paths. No difference. Same. Karma. No difference, but slight different interpretation. But accept cause and effect exactly the same way. Rebirth, Theravada and Mahayana, no difference. But later, some other school developed another concept. What is that? They say rebirth can take place after certain days, not immediately after it. But Theravada school says no. There is no interval. There is no gap. But that is not directly from Mahayana. It is a later development. In the original Mahayana, there is no such difference. Again, Paticca Samuppada, dependent upon origination. How the wheel of existence take place. There is no difference between Mahayana or Theravada. Same. Then, three characteristics of the Buddha's teaching. Anicca, Dukkha, Anatta. Anicca, everything is changeable. No difference. Theravada and Mahayana. Dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, unpleasant feeling. Same doctrine, Theravada and Mahayana. Anatta, there is no permanent entity as self or soul or spirit, that which remain forever, either in heaven or nirvana or in this world. Theravada and Mahayana both reject that belief. So can you say that Mahayanis are wrong? No, we cannot say. Then I told you the difference. They have beautified, decorated, exaggerated various stories and life of the Buddha, and by giving certain interpretation according to the mentality of ordinary people, man in the street. Few examples. Those who cannot understand the real meaning of nirvana, what it is. Even, I don't think even the Theravadians also can appreciate and understand the real meaning of Nibbana, although they don't. Then Mahayanis have done something for ordinary people to understand something. What is that? So they have introduced this pure land, Sukhavati. There are bodhisattvas, there are many Buddhas, Amitabha, And when you pray and worship and recite the name of Amitabha, and after your death you will be there in the pure land. So simple, and develop their confidence and faith and devotion. They have not introduced this. Ordinary people cannot understand anything. Whether it is true or not, it is immaterial. They don't do any harm to anybody. So if you are interested, you can go ahead. I don't want to say that you are wrong. According to your understanding capacity, you can analyze. But the majority here, especially in this part of the world, China, Korea, Japan, again Mongolia, Tibet, Siberia, Nepal, Bhutan, Assam, this concept is very important. But in other countries like India, Thailand, Burma, Sri Lanka, and some other countries, they have not developed this concept. That means they have not accommodated this into their way of religious life. This is the only difference. So, we should not argue. We should not try to ridicule. Because this, as I mentioned, contributed to maintain this religion by cultivating their devotion. Later, when they develop their intellect or the spiritual development further and further, they will come to know that they are not interested in those things. Now, ordinary Buddhists are very keen to go to heaven, to paradise, after their death. But when you refer to the Buddha's teaching, Tripitaka, the original teaching, what is the Buddha's attitude towards heavenly life? I can give one quotation in Dhammapada. Pathavya eka rajyena saggassa gamanena sabba lokadi paccena sotapatti phalang vara. This is the Buddha's attitude. Assume that one day you can become a ruler of a country. It is a highest achievement if you can become a ruler, isn't it? A king. Pathavya ekarajya. If not, saggassa gamanena. You had the chance to go to heaven, to paradise, to enjoy your life. If not, sabba lokadipatya, sabba loka, the whole world, whole universe. You will be able to control the whole universe, not only this world. See how powerful you are now. Then the Buddha says, Sotapatti phalang vara. When you compare all these achievements, becoming a ruler of a country and enjoying heaven bliss in paradise and becoming a ruler of the whole universe, and you compare all those things with the first stage of sainthood, Sotapanna, all those achievements are still very, very low. Attaining the first stage of sainthood is higher than all these things. Then how can we prove? And then you can understand. By becoming a ruler of a country, do you think that ruler can sleep peacefully? Do you think that he can live few 100 years just because he is a ruler? Do you think there are no enemies to kill him? Not only that, do you think he can stop all his sufferings because of his rule? If not, by experiencing heavenly bliss, do you think people can stop their rebirth and decay and old age and death again and again? Can they stop this? If not, by becoming a rule of the whole universe, do you think you can stop your sicknesses, your old age, your decay and your death, your rebirth? Cannot. But even after attaining the first stage of sainthood, now there is a guarantee that rebirth never takes place again as an animal. Rebirth never takes place again as ghost or spirit or devil. Rebirth never takes place in an unfortunate state. Rebirth never takes place again as blind and cripples and mad and this and that. You will be free from all these problems. When you develop further and further, few more stages, then you will be free from all your problems, physical and mental problems, all your suffering. But can you get rid of all these sufferings by becoming a ruler or by enjoying heavenly bliss, say 1 million years or few millions of years? One day there will be an end to it. Here, the Buddha's attitude. But we are crazy when people talk about heaven. This is the aim of Buddhism. So we have neglected the sayings of the Buddha like this, went on developing our worldly way of thinking to gain more power, more worldly thing, more material thing. So as far as Pali Tripitaka is concerned, so far, no one could reject or refute, ridicule even one word from the Pali Tripitaka. All those other religions who criticize and condemn this religion, what do they talk? They talk only about burning joysticks and this and that, or worshipping idols, that's all. But can they talk anything about Four Noble Truth, Eight Noble Path, and cause and effect and Panchasamuppada? Can they understand? In Pali Tripitaka, you can find the basic teaching. So can you point out any weakness here in the Pali Tripitaka to prove scientifically? By using your scientific knowledge, you say, oh, this we cannot agree with our modern scientific knowledge. What the Buddha says is wrong. Can you point out? That is more than enough for you to understand the basic teachings of the Buddha made in the Pali Tripitaka. The fourth Buddhist council. I mentioned about the first council 3 months after passing away of the Buddha. Second council 100 years after his passing away. Third council 200 years after his passing away. Then I mentioned about the Mahayana Buddhist Council which they held in Kashmir nearly 700 years after the passing away of the Buddha. But before that, the fourth council was held in Sri Lanka. That is 80 BC, 80 years before Christ. And after that council, the whole Tripitaka, the teachings of the Buddha, have been recorded in writing. Before that, there was no written record. They maintained in memory from teacher to disciples. So many hundreds or few thousands, we do not know how they maintain. They have divided into different sections to memorize. Then taught their disciples. They carried out for nearly 500 years without any written record. Then after this council that they held in Sri Lanka, they have decided to record, because there was a very big famine, disaster for nearly 12 years. Then many of those scholar monks could manage to escape, have gone to India and some other countries, and after that they have returned to their own country and decided, if we are not going to record in writing, later the original teachings may disappear. Then they decided to hold this fourth council, then started writing. So that is the first time in history the teachings of the Buddha was recorded. Then what happened in India? There were so many political upheavals and certain enemies of Buddhism, like Brahmins and some others who could not tolerate Buddhism, destroyed the temples and the monasteries, and they have massacred thousands and thousands of monks. Then foreign invaders destroyed libraries and all the sacred places. So whatever they have written in India in Sanskrit but not in Pali disappeared. And before that, they have introduced Buddhism to China. That is in the 1st century. 3 Indian Buddhist scholars visited China, studied Chinese language, and helped those Chinese scholars to translate the text into Chinese, Sanskrit, but not in Pali. Bodhidharma, Kumarajiva, Kasyapa Matanga, they are the well-known Indian Buddhist scholars who studied Chinese language and supported the Chinese scholars to translate. So the translations are available, but the original Sanskrit text completely disappeared from India. And later, certain scholars who have visited Tibet found out 1 or 2 original books written in Sanskrit. Because Buddhism was introduced to Tibet, I think about 1,500 years ago, not earlier. They have translated into Tibetan language. But the original Sanskrit books also, they have found out 1 or 2. Then from China to Korea, from Korea to Japan, translated into their original language. When I visited one temple in Korea, I found out they have engraved the whole Tripitaka in Korean language, the marble slab.